Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma, and today I want to show you how I paint one of the new Darkoath Fellriders from the Darkoath army box that Games Workshop kindly sent to me. So I start off with a model that's been primed using the White Scars primer, and then I paint it all over with one of the speed paints from the army painter, and this one is called Burnt Moss. And it's I think very quickly becoming my favorite sort of undercoat paint for when I'm using the so-called slap chop method. So what that entails is you start out with some sort of darker underlying color, then you dry brush with a bit of white, and then you can put on some more translucent colors, for instance, speed paints or contrast paints or something, and that'll just help you to achieve an even greater effect of light and shadow. And so that's what I'm trying to do here, because I want this to be part of an army, and so I don't want it to be something that takes, you know, absolutely ages just to finish one single model. So next up, the first color I'm using is a speed paint from Army Paints, and this one is called Battleship Gray, and it's a nice sort of cold gray color. It's quite light in the color tone, as you can see here, which is why I think the slap chop method with the darker colors underneath works particularly well for a color such as this, because on its own, just over a white primed model, it would be quite light and you wouldn't have a lot of difference between light and shadow on its own. Then, to create a little bit of visual interest, I decided to paint the hairs just around the hooves another color, and I wanted it to be a darker gray color, but I also wanted it to be a warmer color, just again to have a little bit more of a contrast without it really being something that just jumps out at you. And so the color I'm using here is called Noble Skin, and it's a grayish sort of brown, and I think it works pretty well alongside the Battleship Gray. To match the hair around the hooves, and also just because I like gray horses that have black manes and tails, I decided just to go with a simple black color, and this one is one of the contrast paints from Citadel. It's called Black Templars. So just a completely standard black paint job on both the tail, the mane, and also on the hair of the rider. By the way, in this video, I'm not going to show you how I paint the rider, because she's painted exactly the same way as the Darkoath Marauder that I painted in a video for yesterday, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes if you haven't seen that and if you're interested in watching that as well. Then for the icon that she's holding in her hand, I decided I wanted to go with similar colors to what I did yesterday, where I went with orange for the armor on the Marauder, and then with blue on bluish turquoise colors for the cloth. And I thought this icon was so big that just doing it all in orange would be, I felt it would be feel a little bit heavy somehow, and so I decided to go with just a mixture of the two. So you have the blue sort of with the center of the face, and then you have the orange parts around the face on the outer rim, and just a really quick wet blend here. As you can see, again, I'm not going for display quality. I'm going for something that I think looks nice and fun, and that will look really really cool on a tabletop. Then, because there is so much leather and fur on this model, I am just using, I think, more or less every single speed paint and contrast paint I have that's any sort of believable shade of brown, because I don't want to spend ages painting this up. So if I can make it look a little bit more interesting by just switching between different brown colors, I definitely will. So I have just used all sorts of different brown colors. Snakebite leather and Gorgrons of fur and satchel brown from the armor paints, and all sorts of browns. Then I was a little bit, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to paint the cloth that is hanging sort of over the saddle, if I wanted to paint that orange or if I should paint it blue, because of course the blue would match the rest of the cloth, and this is cloth after all. But I thought there's just going to be much more blue than orange perhaps on this model, but in the end I went with the blue, also because I think it just fits really well with the rest of the colors on the horse, because it's such a nice cold bluish gray color anyway, and I'm quite happy with that choice. But it would be fun to see it with with perhaps an orange saddle cloth somehow. Then, even though I was really happy with the gray color of the coat, I still felt that it just needed a slight touch of a darker tone just to highlight some of the, or underline some of the muscle definition and some of the joints. And so I used a little bit of Griff Charger Grey, one of the contrast paints from Citadel, and I thinned it down a little bit and just used it to really quickly apply a little bit of shadow. Again, this is something that you absolutely don't need to do, but I am just having so much fun painting this horse. I think it's a beautiful sculpt, and I love horses, and so I think I ended up spending a little bit too much time on the horse, just because, I mean, yeah. I just think they're beautiful and they're amazing sculpts, so there you are. Then for the hair around the hooves, I used the same color I used for painting up the original base color, the Noble Skin, and then I mixed it up with a little bit of Wraithbone to keep the warmer tone that I wanted for that part of the leg, and then I just used that to carefully highlight the individual strands of hair. For the rest of the horse's coat, I used a color called Glacier Blue from Vallejo, and it's a really nice cold bluish gray, and I applied that as highlights, but instead of trying to make a smooth glaze or something like that, I decided to use just really quick thin lines to give sort of the illusion of fur, because I think these horses look like, well, they look more like overgrown ponies somehow, like I don't know, a Norwegian fjord or an Icelandic horse. I know you're not supposed to call those ponies, but I mean, they are no bigger than ponies, that's for sure. So they look much more like a shaggy pony. You can also see that they have the longer hairs around the hooves, and you have a bit of hair under the belly and around the back of the thigh, just to sort of make them look like they are just a little bit shaggy. And I thought that the texture here with the highlights, it just worked really well, and also saved me a bit of time compared to having to glaze it all up. So I first used the Glacier Blue and then a little bit of white to finish it off. Then for the tail, I first used a color called Steel Gray, also from Vallejo, to highlight that. And this is the part of the model that I am the least happy with, to tell you the truth. I think it's really hard to highlight something that's black, because I mean, if you're really good at it, it can look amazing. But for me, at least, it usually just ends up looking like it's a sort of desaturated, boring gray color. I don't know how to highlight black without it looking a little bit boring. But anyways, I just decided that this was not the most important part of the model for me anyways, so I just kept going, and yeah, it's fine. The next layer of highlights was again the Glacier Blue to tie it in with the rest of the horse, and also because I wasn't lazy, I was being efficient, and that's the color I had on my wet palette. And then lastly, a little bit of white. Again, I'm not completely convinced by neither the tail, the hair on the rider, or the mane, but I think it's fine. It'll most definitely do for a tabletop piece, that's for sure. Then I spent a little bit of time highlighting all the leather bits, and I just used the same colors I used originally, and then mixed them up with a bit of Wraithbone to make sure they had a bit of a warmer tone. Again, I didn't want them to be cold, because so much on the horse is cold in tone, so if I could just keep the warmer tone, I thought that was a good idea for all the leather bits, and that's also what I did for the skin of the rider as well. Then for highlighting the icon, first off, I used two colors from Huge Miniatures, and these are called Gamma Green and Blaster Blue, and they mix up to a nice sort of turquoise color, and I used that to highlight all the blue parts of the face. And it's a little bit tricky to see here, but it's a quite nice vibrant turquoise color, and I don't really have another one that I like better, and also this comes with the added benefit of being fluorescent, because all the colors I'm using from Huge Miniatures are fluorescent. Then for the first layer of highlights on the orange, I'm using a color from Vallejo called Orange Fire, and this unfortunately is not fluorescent, but it is a really nice saturated orange that I like as I like to use often as a base color for when I'm doing orange, and then I can apply the fluorescent orange later on, which I will also do here on this piece. Then for the next layer of highlights on the blue, I used again the same two colors as before, Blaster Blue and Gamma Green, but I just mixed in a little bit of white to make it stand out a little bit more. You'll perhaps notice that I'm again not trying to do these layers very smoothly. I'm not doing glazes or anything, and the paint I'm using is relatively thick. But I do try to make sure that parts of the blue and parts of the orange touch each other, so it doesn't look like they're completely separated, but are actually sort of integrated into one thing together. But I don't mind that it looks a little bit stylized, perhaps because this is, after all, an icon, and I think it also helps create a little bit of contrast between the different ways the model is painted, and that often adds a little bit of visual interest that I quite enjoy. Then I used the laser orange here for the next layer of highlights, and that is one of the ones from Huge Miniatures that will make sure that it glows under UV light. Then lastly, for the blue, I use a little bit of Starfire Yellow, which is a fluorescent neon yellow, so a very cold yellow color mixed with a lot of white paint. And I use that because both, I think, really light cold yellow works well as a highlight for blue in general, a tip from Vince Venturella. I think I've said so many times here on this channel, but also because a really cold highlight here works very well, I think, with the warm yellow highlight that I'm applying lastly here over the orange. This is just Flaskage Yellow from Citadel, but you could use any type of yellow color here. It's just really standard yellow. But I just think it's nice to incorporate these two end results somehow, that you have the very of course, orange and blue are contrasting colors in and of themselves, and then you have the very warm and the very cold tones next to each other as well. I think that just works great together. Then I just wanted to show you real quick how big this model is compared to other models, and here you have one of the Free Guild Cavaliers from the new Cities of Sigmar, and they are approximately the same size, though perhaps the Free Guild horse looks slightly bigger because of all the armor, whereas the Darkoath horse looks slightly more like a pony, and the other one looks slightly more like a horse. But this one has actually a decent sized face, whereas the to my mind at least, the ones from the Cities of Sigmar, they have very small faces, the horses. And then you have it here next to an old Bretonian horse, and it's definitely bigger than that. So just to give you an idea of how big these models are. And here you can see the final result. Overall, I'm fairly happy with it. No, that's actually a lie. I'm really happy with it. I think the cold gray colors on the coat and the mane and the tail works really well together with the turquoise and the orange, and then the darker, more saturated tones on the skin and the leather. I think that actually works really well. And also, I just really enjoyed painting this model because, as I said, I like the Darkoath models as a whole. I think as a new range, they are amazing. But there's just something about horses. I used to have horses myself, and I miss having my own horse. And so painting really nicely sculpted horses, it just adds a little bit of extra fun and enjoyment to the painting process for me. And here you can see what it looks like under a UV light, because since I used the fluorescent paints from Huge Miniatures, parts of the model will glow up like this if you turn on a black light. It doesn't have a lot of practical value, I'll definitely give you that, but I think it's just fun, and it's something I never do before I'm completely done with the model. So it's a sort of a bit of a carrot at the end for me. It's a reward because I don't know what it'll look like, but I always think it's interesting and fun to just turn on the black light and see the final result. So before you leave, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the wonderful people who support Dice and Demons over on Patreon. So thank you so much to Thomas Madsen, Gwen L, Jordan Hollands, Queen's Wolf, Double J's Terrain, Mola, Steve Eberly, Nassim Makaya, Andrew Correa, Anthony Castro, Bosworth the Rogue, Mando Project, Starcon85, S. Beer, Echinococus, Elliot Philby, Cyberfossil, Cinnamon Coffee 87, Terrainery, Joshua and Anya Pavelczyk, Charlie Robertson, and VT Knight 007. If you would also like to support Dice and Demons on Patreon, I will leave a link to that in the show notes. And of course, as always, if you have any sort of questions or comments or suggestions for future videos, that sort of thing, please leave them in the comments section and I'll do my very best to get back to you. Also, if you want to stay up to date on my painting projects, you can do so over on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram, where you can find me as Dice and Demons. So I really hope you liked this video, guys, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!